Neil and Paula had spent 40 years together raising 2 children, Megan and Andrew, and enjoying the fruits of their hard work. Neil, now retired, stayed active by playing golf despite some heart problems. Paula, energetic for her age, focused on maintaining their home. Though their marriage had faced challenges, it had settled into a familiar routine. However, cracks started to form. Paula, once content with their slower lifestyle, began to crave more. Neil believed they had adjusted to his health limitations, but Paula felt otherwise. Her growing dissatisfaction went unnoticed by Neil, creating an emotional distance that opened the door to something unexpected. One morning, Neil's golf game was cancelled due to heavy rain. Disappointed, he returned home earlier than usual, not bothering to warn Paula. When he entered the house, he was stunned to see Paula in a pink silk robe, standing with a much younger man. At 59, Paula still had an attractive figure, which clearly hadn't gone unnoticed by this stranger. As Neil walked in, Paula greeted him with a smile and attempted to kiss him, but he pulled away. "Are you out of your mind, Paula? I'd rather not know where your mouth's been, though I can guess," Neil said, disgusted. Realizing what she had nearly done, Paula quickly introduced the young man, Ryan, to her husband. Ryan was about an inch shorter than Neil, but his fit, athletic build suggested he was likely in his 20s or 30s, possibly a former college athlete. His short brown hair and average face didn't stand out, but he confidently placed a hand on Neil's shoulder. Neil held back the urge to react violently. "Nice to meet you. Paula's told me a lot about you. Don't worry, in 25 or 30 years, I'll probably have the same issues you think I have," Ryan quipped smugly. Neil, who missed the closeness he once had with Paula, thought they were doing fine with some adjustments. Ryan's smug smile irritated him, but Neil kept his cool. "Ryan, get out of my house. If I see you here again, I'll make sure you regret it." "I have a weapon," Neil warned. Ryan's grin vanished as he quickly left, mumbling, "I thought you didn't mind." Neil locked the door and stormed to his bedroom, furious that Paula seemed unbothered by what had just happened. She followed him in, now with her robe closed. "That was rude," she remarked. Neil, still in disbelief, snapped, "Rude? I walk in on you with some guy you just slept with, and I'm the rude one? You're out of your mind." Paula softened, trying to touch Neil's shoulder, but he pulled away. "I'm sorry, Neil. What we had was nice, but it wasn't enough for me. You could have told me that. Where did you even find this guy?" "He's a friend of Deborah's. When she didn't want him, she gave me his information. He's just using you for easy sex." "Maybe, but I'm using him too, so what difference does it make?" Paula said calmly. "How long has this been going on?" "A few months. He comes when you're golfing, takes care of me, and leaves before you're back. It doesn't affect you, you get your exercise, I get mine." Neil suddenly realized why Saturdays had become linen-changing days. "I don't care if I'm not here, I'm done with this. I'll give up golf if I have to." "Neil, be smart. You need your golf. This works for both of us. Maybe for you, Paula, but not for me." This was the last straw. Neil went to his room to shower and change into something casual. Meanwhile, Paula dressed and drove to Megan's house, where her daughter lived with her husband and 2 daughters. By the time Neil finished showering, the house was empty. With no note left, he assumed Paula needed space, which suited him fine since he felt the same. The shower helped Neil calm down. While he understood Paula's needs, he couldn't justify her actions. He knew he wouldn't have done the same if their roles were reversed and wasn't willing to overlook her betrayal. The next day was the 4th of July, a holiday the family had always celebrated together. Neil prepped marinated chicken, hamburgers, and hot dogs for the younger kids, eager to spend time with everyone. The barbecue went smoothly, with friends and family gathering. Paula looked radiant, laughing and smiling as if nothing had happened. Though Neil was still hurt by what he discovered, he considered forgiving her once, given their long marriage. As guests began to leave, Neil excused himself for a nap, wanting to rest before the evening fireworks. After a couple of hours, he woke, feeling refreshed and ready to enjoy the night. He changed and went to the living room, where his family sat around the table. Paula was at the far end with his granddaughters, Ellie and Sophia. Megan and her husband, John, sat with Andrew and his wife, Rachel. The atmosphere felt heavy, and Neil realized they were staging an intervention. Megan spoke first. "We need to talk about Mom." Neil glanced at Paula, her face unreadable, and then back at his daughter. "What about Mom?" "She told us about Ryan," Megan said. Neil was stunned. "She told you?" "Yes, and about your issues," Megan confirmed. Neil stared at his wife, stunned that she had shared such personal details with their family. "My problems? This doesn't concern any of you." "But Mom's happiness does," Megan responded. Neil turned to Paula. "Are you unhappy?" "I am happy, Neil." "Please don't doubt that," Paula replied. Megan interrupted again. "But Mom has needs, and, well, you can't meet them. Isn't that true? So I'm selfish for not accepting this?" Neil asked, his voice edged with disbelief. "We're not labeling it that way, Dad. We're just saying you should support Mom taking care of things quietly, since you can't," Megan explained. Neil looked around the room, realizing his family seemed to accept, or at least tolerate, Paula's infidelity. He felt older and more defeated than ever. "Do you all agree?" Neil asked, searching their faces. They nodded, though some hesitated. He needed clarity. "Andrew, do you agree with this?" Neil asked his son. "Yes. It'll help Mom," Andrew said reluctantly. "John." Neil turned to his son-in-law, expecting no disagreement. "I don't see it being a big problem," John replied. "Rachel?" Neil asked his daughter-in-law, who seemed to shy away from meeting his gaze. "Well, as long as she's discreet," Rachel said uncertainly. Finally, Neil turned to his granddaughters. They were part of a different generation, and he wasn't sure where they stood on the issue. "What about you girls?" "Grandpa, we shouldn't be involved," Ellie, the eldest, said cautiously. "Come on, you're almost adults." "I'm sure you have opinions," Neil pressed. Ellie and Sophia exchanged glances, then looked at their parents, who urged them to speak. Neil knew what was coming. They had been convinced to side with their grandmother. "Well, a lot of our friends are fine with their partners seeing other people." "It's just sex," Ellie finally said. "It's just sex." Neil echoed, his voice heavy with dismay. Neil had expected to hear this eventually. Paula had clearly manipulated everyone to get her way and keep her affair going. Realizing there was no point in arguing, Neil looked at Paula, who was watching him eagerly. "That's it, Paula. Majority rules. You'll get what you want," Neil said bitterly. Paula's face lit up with satisfaction. Neil turned to leave but heard her call his name. For a moment, he hoped she might reconsider, but instead, she asked, "Can I tell Ryan you were joking about eliminating him?" "Sure," Neil said coldly. "I'm going for a drive." "Dad, it's time for the fireworks," Andrew reminded him. "Go without me." "I don't want to go," Neil replied. As he left the house, he heard cheers behind him. Glancing through the window, he saw Paula being hugged by the family, united in their support of her affair. She was already calling Ryan to confirm their next meeting, assuring him that Neil had backed down. The family piled into the car, chatting and laughing as they headed to the fireworks, confident Neil would come around. Meanwhile, Neil drove to a quiet hill overlooking the city, a place he often went to think. He was deeply hurt by his family's betrayal, feeling cast aside and useless. Their support of Paula's infidelity made him feel like an outsider, as if he had been discarded, much like the old stories of elders being abandoned when they were no longer seen as useful. All Neil wanted was to sleep, but napping during the day had its downsides. It was after midnight when he finally returned home. He saw that Megan's car was still there, along with Paula's, but everyone else had left. As he approached, Paula opened the front door, likely alerted by the sound of his car. "Where have you been?" "I was so worried," she said. Neil walked past her without responding. Megan sat on the sofa, looking at him curiously. "Why are you still here?" he asked. "Mom was worried when you didn't come back after the fireworks. Everyone else had to leave early, so I stayed." "You could have answered your phone," Megan replied. Neil glanced at his phone, remembering he had turned it off earlier. "As you can see, I'm fine." "You can go home," Neil said flatly. Megan was shocked. Her father was usually kind and polite, but this was different. She watched him head to his bedroom and shut the door. Grabbing her purse, she kissed her mom goodbye and left. By the time Paula finished cleaning, Neil was already asleep. The house remained quiet the following week. Paula knew Neil wasn't happy with her affair, but she believed he would come to terms with it because he loved her. She was confident he would eventually forget or push it aside. For Neil, though, it felt like his life had crumbled. After decades of being a devoted family man, he was now cast aside by the very people he had prioritized. Paula's decision to involve the family in her affair marked the end of their marriage in his eyes. Their support of her betrayal shattered his sense of belonging in the family. Everything he had built was slipping away. On Saturday, Neil followed his routine and drove to the country club to meet his golf group, 8 older men who mixed up their foursomes weekly. Though Neil tried to focus on the game, he knew exactly what was happening at home. His performance wasn't the worst, but it was the worst he'd had in a while. Smiling through the light-hearted jokes felt nearly impossible. Paula watched Neil leave for golf at 7 a.m., hoping to show affection with a kiss, but he remained cold and distant. Though she hated hurting him, she pushed the thought aside. When Ryan arrived, she had him park down the street to avoid attracting attention. After he knocked, she let him in, wearing only a robe, which quickly ended up on the floor as they kissed passionately. Ryan lifted Paula into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, where their encounter lasted about 2 hours. Afterward, Ryan showered while Paula made the bed and started the laundry. By the time Neil was expected home, everything was in order. When Neil didn't return by 2 p.m., Paula became slightly concerned. By 3 o'clock, she started calling him, but all calls went to voicemail. By 5 o'clock, with still no word, her worry grew. By 7 o'clock, she called Megan for help. Soon Megan, her husband John, and their daughters arrived at Paula's house. John went to the country club, where he learned Neil had left hours earlier. Megan called the police, but they couldn't officially file a missing person report yet. With no way to reach Neil's golfing friends, the family was left to wait anxiously. Around 11 p.m., Ellie saw headlights coming up the driveway. Sensing a confrontation, she and Sophia went upstairs, while John, already asleep, stayed in Andrew's old room. Only Paula and Megan remained to face Neil. Neil entered the house, unsurprised to see Paula waiting in the hallway and only mildly surprised to find Megan still there. He had seen her car outside but assumed she might leave them alone. Clearly, she was staying to support her mother. "Where have you been?" Paula snapped. "I was playing golf," Neil replied calmly. "Not all afternoon, you weren't there anymore." "True. After golf, I had lunch at the clubhouse. Then I saw the new Dwayne Johnson movie. Not bad, a bit cliched, though." "I don't care about the details, Neil," Paula shot back. "You asked where I was," Neil muttered. "I want to know why you didn't come home and why you ignored your phone." "My phone didn't ring," Neil said, showing her it was off. "And I didn't come home because I didn't want to be here when your friend was." Frustrated, Paula said, Everything was cleaned up long before you finished golf. There was no reason for you to stay out all day. As I said, I won't be here at the same time as your friend. It's late. I'm going to bed. Neil walked past Paula, briefly meeting Megan's gaze but saying nothing as he went to the bedroom. He expected one of them to follow, but neither did. As he got ready for bed, he overheard voices in the hallway and realized Megan's family was gathered in the house. Great, he thought. By the time Paula came to bed, Neil was already asleep, or pretending to be. She considered waking him to talk but decided against it. The following weekend passed similarly. Paula neither called nor texted Neil during the day. She had accepted that he would be gone and used the time to thoroughly clean the house again. However, as the day dragged on, Paula started feeling uneasy being alone, so she called Megan, who agreed to come over and keep her company until Neil got back. John and the girls stayed home, but Megan came to support her mother. Neil arrived home around 11 p.m., surprised to see Megan's car parked at the curb again. He wondered if another confrontation was brewing. Walking through the door, he was greeted by Paula's warm smile and a kiss on the cheek, with Megan smiling in the background. "Why don't you change, love? Then you can tell me what you've been up to all day," Paula said softly, almost cheerfully. Neil was a bit confused. Paula seemed more relaxed than usual, her good mood intact. It didn't take him long to assume she'd had her usual meeting with Ryan earlier in the day, which had left her in high spirits. Sighing, Neil went to the bedroom to change into his pajamas. When he returned to the living room, Megan was still there, seemingly waiting to speak to him before leaving. She hesitated for a moment and then said, "Dad, I know this is tough for you, but I just want to say how amazing it is that you show your love for Mom by letting her do this. It's really helped her." Neil stared at his daughter, shocked. "Letting her? Is that how you see it now?" He felt the weight of Megan's words sink in. They thought he was allowing it, as if he had given his approval for the affair. He couldn't believe the situation had reached this point. He realized they all believed he had accepted it. Looking at Megan, his voice heavy with resignation, he said, "I'm telling you now, Megan, this is the last conversation we'll have on this topic. The last. Make sure everyone knows." Taken aback by her father's stern tone, Megan nodded in understanding. "Of course, Dad. I get it. It's hard to forget if people keep bringing it up. I'll tell everyone." With that, she kissed him on the cheek and left. A moment later, Paula came in with drinks for both of them. Neil couldn't help but think Paula had planned for Megan to speak to him first. He drank his water in silence, watching Paula move around the room with her usual ease, seemingly unaware of the tension still gnawing at him. This pattern continued for months. Paula enjoyed her relationship with Ryan while Neil found new ways to occupy his time. He still played golf every Saturday morning and watched movies, but he began exploring other activities as well. He tried mini-golf, bowling, and even arcade games. He wasn't very good at them, but he had fun, finding some solace in these new distractions. At home, life settled into a routine, or at least what passed for normal. Ryan was never mentioned. Every evening, Neil and Paula had dinner together and engaged in pleasant, if ordinary, conversations. Their closeness had shifted, but Paula convinced herself that her relationship with Ryan didn't affect her marriage. She continued showing love and affection toward Neil. If she noticed that Neil rarely reciprocated, she didn't mention it, perhaps too comfortable in the situation she had created. Maybe because Neil never brought up Ryan, Paula believed he was more okay with it than he really was. Neil was in for a shock when Thanksgiving arrived. "Mom, Ryan's here." Megan called from the front of the house. Neil, sitting in a chair reading the newspaper, froze. If he had been drinking something, he would have spat it out. His hands tightened around the paper as the words echoed in his head. "Oh, good," Paula said. "I wasn't sure he'd make it." Neil felt a surge of anger rise in him. He pressed the lever on the chair, lowering the footrest, and stood up, seething. "What the hell is he doing here?" he demanded, glaring at Paula. "I invited him for Thanksgiving," she replied calmly. "He doesn't have family in town and had nowhere to go. I told you I wouldn't be here at the same time as him. That's why I'm not around on Saturdays." Neil's voice trembled with rage. "And now you invite him to my house for a family holiday? This is my home too, Neil. He's not here for sex, it's just dinner." "I expect you to behave," Paula said coldly, standing firm. Neil couldn't believe what he was hearing. Paula turned and walked to the front door to greet Ryan, introducing him to their children, their spouses, and their granddaughters as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She took Ryan's hand and led him into the living room to meet Neil. But when they turned the corner, Neil was no longer there, or at least not in the chair where he had been moments before. Paula looked around, puzzled, before realizing he had left. She headed to the kitchen, hearing the garage door motor start. She arrived just in time to see the door lowering as Neil's car pulled out of the driveway. "Was that Dad who just left?" Megan asked, noticing the taillights disappear. "Yes, it was," Paula responded irritably, heading to her bedroom to gather her thoughts. Ryan, looking uneasy, approached Megan. "Should I go? Maybe it'd be better if I left," he asked. "No, Ryan, it's fine. This is my dad's problem, not yours. You're always welcome here," Megan reassured him. Ryan hesitated, clearly not wanting to cause more trouble, but when Megan reassured him again, he nodded and stayed. The family and Ryan bonded over dinner, and despite the underlying tension, the evening went smoothly. Ryan engaged with Andrew and John, chatting about football, while the women went shopping. No one noticed when Neil's car passed by later that night. By the time everyone returned from shopping, Andrew and John had dozed off on the couch, and Neil was still gone. Concerned, Megan woke her husband and kids, sending them home, but she stayed behind to keep her mother company. Andrew and Rachel left, leaving the house quiet as Paula and Megan waited for Neil. Neil came home around midnight, hoping Paula had gone to bed by then. But as soon as he stepped inside, she was there waiting. "Where have you been all day?" she demanded, her voice sharp with frustration. "I went to Denny's for Thanksgiving dinner, then caught a few movies," Neil replied calmly. "We had a great meal right here, and you went to Denny's. Why would you do that?" "It's not about the food, Paula. It's about the company." Paula's frustration peaked. "I can't believe a 64-year-old man can't be polite to a guest I invited into our home. I would never treat someone you invited like that. I told you I wouldn't be in this house at the same time as him. That didn't just mean when he's here for sex, I meant any time. And you knew that. Yet you did it anyway. It was just dinner, Neil." "Maybe for you," Neil said, raising his newspaper between them and ending the conversation. After 5 minutes of silence, Megan knelt beside him, her voice soft, almost childlike. "Dad, please try to understand that he means a lot to her. She doesn't love him, but she cares about him. She didn't want him to be alone for the holiday." Neil sighed. "And you don't think there's a problem with Mom's friend becoming part of the family?" "He's not family, Dad. He's just a friend, like anyone else." Neil realized the argument was over. "Of course, Megan. I understand." Megan looked relieved. "I hope so, Dad. See you later." She kissed him on the cheek and left. Paula didn't appear again that night. When Neil finally dragged himself to bed, Paula was already asleep. Thanksgiving marked a turning point. In some ways, displays of affection between Neil and Paula almost vanished. They lived more like neighbors than a married couple. Paula believed her decision to have a lover was justified by Neil's condition, viewing his reaction as selfish and driven by pride. Neil, however, saw it as the ultimate betrayal of their decades-long marriage. They only communicated when necessary, and the love that had sustained them for over 40 years had faded. When Paula mentioned needing to do last-minute shopping on Christmas. On New Year's Eve, Neil didn't say a word. Although Paula hadn't needed to give him any explanations for years, he knew where she was going. He didn't have to follow her or check her phone, her expression told him everything. Whether she planned to exchange gifts or something more, he wasn't sure, but he knew she would have a private celebration with Ryan. At midnight, Neil kissed Paula, though without the passion of past years. Paula felt disappointed. She couldn't express her feelings to Ryan at that moment, but she still called him the next day to wish him a happy new year. With Valentine's Day approaching, Neil planned a nice dinner at an upscale seafood restaurant. Paula looked forward to it, thinking maybe her husband was coming back to her. However, Neil had lingering suspicions. Paula's desire to spend holidays with her lover made him question her intentions for Valentine's Day. He doubted she'd let the day pass without seeing Ryan. Neil left work early and parked at the end of the street, where he had a clear view of their house. Sure enough, Ryan parked around the corner and walked to the house. Neil half expected him to walk right in, but instead, Ryan knocked, and Paula let him in. Neil doubted they were just going to talk. It was their personal Valentine's Day celebration. Apparently, they weren't just casual lovers anymore. That evening's dinner was subdued. Paula approached Neil with hope, thinking they might rekindle their relationship, but the good mood he'd shown over the past few days was gone. Paula was disappointed but tried to make the best of it, wondering what had changed. With no small children around, Easter became just an excuse for a big family dinner. They hid a few large plastic eggs in the yard, usually containing gift cards or other small prizes, just for fun and to get into the holiday spirit. To Neil's relief, Ryan wasn't invited. Paula had at least respected that after the Thanksgiving disaster. But Neil knew she met Ryan on days other than Saturday mornings, maybe more often than he realized. She had done it for Valentine's Day and could easily do it on other days as well. After the morning festivities, Neil announced he was going to lie down. While he was a little tired, it was nothing he couldn't handle. Mostly, he wanted to avoid being around the family that had betrayed him. He couldn't avoid them completely, but he could limit his time with them. It was a beautiful day, so Neil opened a window overlooking the backyard, letting in a cool breeze. Unfortunately, he also overheard Paula and Megan's conversation. "So, how's Ryan doing?" he heard Megan ask. "Shoo, not too loud. I don't want your father to hear." Okay, Megan replied, lowering her voice but still loud enough for Neil to hear. "I just can't believe my mom has a boyfriend 10 years younger than me." "He's not my boyfriend, Megan. He's just..." "Come on, Mom. You sleep with him 2-3 times a week, and you both go out to dinner. You might not want to call him your boyfriend, but that's what he is." Okay, he's my boyfriend. I just want to be considerate of your father's feelings." "I know, Mom. I love Dad too, and I don't want him to get hurt. But let's be honest, he's an old man, and you're still young. He's only 5 years older than me. In actual age, yes. But you're active, and he can barely get through the day without a nap. You deserve this. Honestly, I'm a little jealous you're dating again. Does anyone else know? I mean, other than Saturday mornings, Andrew, John, Rachel." "No. I don't involve them. Does everyone agree with this?" "Andrew and John think it's fine. They agree that I should meet my needs since Dad can't anymore. Rachel's the only one who thinks it's wrong, but she doesn't want to hurt Dad, so she won't say anything. What Dad doesn't know won't hurt him." Hearing how deep Paula's betrayal ran and how Megan fully supported her mother's affair, Neil felt the last bits of love and affection for them leave his heart. Though he had made tentative plans before, out of love for his family and his long marriage to Paula, he had held back. Now, it was time to begin his final plans in earnest. Neil quietly closed the window and lay down. Over the next few months, Neil's relationships with Paula and Megan deteriorated further. Things weren't much better with Andrew and John, but he tried to improve things with Rachel and his granddaughters, believing they were too young to fully understand the situation. Mother's Day had its own traditions in Neil's family. For them, it meant brunch at an upscale French-themed restaurant. The food and service were excellent, with prices to match. When the kids were younger, Neil would take the family out to celebrate with Paula. As the kids grew up and started working, they took over the tradition, doing the same for Father's Day. The family had an unusual arrangement: the other parent didn't attend the celebration. Years ago, Neil stopped going to Mother's Day, and Paula stopped attending Father's Day. The kids celebrated with each parent separately, and Neil had always been fine with that, until this year. Based on recent events, he had a feeling something wasn't right. Instead of spending his usual free time reading, Neil dressed and headed to the restaurant. Paula had been gone about 30 minutes, so he knew she'd already be there. He didn't plan on participating or even letting anyone know he was there. In fact, he doubted he'd even have to get out of the car. He drove around the parking lot, easily spotting Megan and John's car, followed by Paula's car, then Andrew and Rachel's. Neil began to hope he was wrong. But then he saw what he had feared: tucked away in a corner parking spot was Ryan's car. Neil had seen it enough times to recognize the license plate. His wife, or maybe even his daughter, had invited her lover to a family event, fully knowing Neil wouldn't be there. Despite all that had happened, and despite Neil's fading love for Paula, this new betrayal filled him with rage. Any plans to temper his actions vanished. Neil returned home, grabbed his golf clubs, and headed to the local course. He went through several buckets of balls, losing count by the end. He was exhausted, his shots weren't far or accurate, but he felt better. He drove home ready for a nap. They think I'm useless, that I can't get through a day without rest, Neil thought. Let them keep thinking that. Paula greeted him when he walked in. Neil wondered if she had a private celebration planned with Ryan later, though he no longer cared. It still hurt, but it wasn't worth worrying about anymore. How was Mother's Day with your family? Neil asked, putting slight emphasis on family. It was wonderful, Neil. Thanks for asking. I had a great time with the kids, Paula replied. She didn't mention Ryan. Did this mean the family now considered him part of it, or had she just decided not to bring him up? Neil realized he would never know. He went to the bedroom and took a nap. When the 4th of July came around again, Paula was in a good mood, and Neil knew why. He had stayed by her side for nearly a year now, and Paula undoubtedly thought she had it all figured out. She had a husband who supported her and a younger man she saw several times a week. In her mind, her life was nearly perfect. Ryan had started a new evening job, allowing him to spend a few half-days a week with Paula. Though the pay wasn't much, that wasn't why she was with him. To avoid rubbing it in Neil's face, they mostly stayed out of Paula's bedroom except for their Saturday matinees. They used Ryan's apartment or borrowed a friend's place when necessary, since Ryan had roommates. The hardest part for Paula was excluding Ryan from family events. She didn't bring it up with Neil again, knowing he wouldn't change his mind. That was the only thing that really upset her. At first, and even now, she hoped Neil and Ryan could at least become acquaintances, if not friends. In her view, they weren't competing. Ryan gave her one thing, and Neil gave her another. So, she spent her days with Ryan and her evenings and weekends with Neil. She didn't understand why it couldn't work. Reluctantly, she didn't invite Ryan to the family barbecue and fireworks outing. The family arrived early to help with meal preparations. Neil made sure to stay visible and active, ensuring no one could later doubt that he was too tired. He carefully watched the crowd, wondering if Paula might sneak Ryan in, but Ryan never showed up. As the day wore on, Neil pretended to get more tired. Although some of it was real, much of it was exaggerated. Maybe he overdid it because Paula seemed to notice. "Honey, why don't you lie down and relax before the fireworks?" she suggested gently. The hardest part of all this for Neil was knowing Paula still loved and cared about him, which made what he was about to do even tougher. "I'm not going to the fireworks. I just want to enjoy the day with my family and head to bed early," Neil said. "Are you sure? You missed them last year, but before that, you always loved going," Paula said, genuinely concerned. "Yeah, I'm sure. I guess I'm just getting old. But everyone else will have a great time without me." "Okay, if you're sure," Paula said reluctantly. As soon as she left him, Neil watched her weave through the crowd, searching for Megan. He realized Paula was trying to confirm whether he would attend the fireworks because she planned to invite Ryan. Even though it didn't change anything, the fresh betrayal stung deeply. As the evening progressed, most guests left, leaving only family. Paula, Megan, Andrew, and John all stopped by to ask Neil again if he wanted to join them for the fireworks, expressing how much they'd miss him. Neil saw through it, realizing his family was slipping further away from him. As they prepared to leave, Neil swallowed his anger and said a few words to each family member. Despite the past year, he cherished the memories of their time together and would miss those moments. He hugged his granddaughters the longest. Neil watched with a heavy heart as the family piled into Megan's minivan, laughing and happy, not even noticing his absence. He tried to push them from his mind and focused on his next steps. The family returned later than usual, giving Paula time alone with Ryan. Ryan thanked her for including him, especially since he had no close family nearby. Although only Paula spent significant time with him, the family had come to accept Ryan as part of their extended circle and appreciated how happy he made Paula. They said their goodbyes at the park since he couldn't come back to the house. When the family got home, they tried to be quiet so as not to disturb Neil. They poured drinks and sat around the dining room table, chatting for 30 to 45 minutes, before Paula suddenly remembered Neil and asked Andrew to check on him. Andrew got up and slowly walked into the bedroom. He didn't find Neil asleep but noticed the bedspread pulled back, revealing the snow-white sheets Paula always insisted on. On the bed, he saw Neil's wedding ring and a flash drive. This wasn't a good sign. "He's not there," Andrew said when he returned. "What do you mean, not there?" Paula asked, her voice tinged with panic. "He's gone, Mom. No one's been in the bed, and I found this on the sheets," Andrew replied, holding up the ring and flash drive. Not fully believing it, Paula rushed to the bedroom and saw for herself that the bed was unused. When she returned to the living room, John was already connecting the flash drive to the laptop. The drive contained only one large file. Paula nodded to John, and he double-clicked it. The video began playing. At first, they saw a blank wall but heard voices. Moments later, Neil appeared on camera. "Is it recording?" Neil asked someone off-screen. "Yes," a woman's voice replied. Neil turned to the camera. "Good evening, everyone. If I've timed this right, you're watching this a little after 10 p.m., just back from the fireworks show." Everyone reflexively looked at the clock. It was nearly 11 p.m. They hadn't bothered to check on Neil when they got home. "At this moment, I'm on a plane, flying far beyond the borders of the United States. In case you're wondering, I won't be coming back." "No," Paula cried, breaking into tears. "You betrayed me," Neil's voice continued, "each of you. My wife, who had my love and support for over 40 years, never having to work a day outside of raising our children, threw me aside like trash for a man half my age. And when I dared to object, you turned the whole family against me. I thought 40 years of loyalty, dedication, faithfulness, and support would mean something to you, Paula. I deserved better. Your desires, and let's be honest, they were wants, not needs, should have taken a back seat to my feelings. Doing this behind my back was bad enough, but forcing the family to side with you was even worse. That day felt like 7 knives stabbed into my heart. Paula sobbed as the video continued. Megan, your betrayal hurt just as much as your mother's. Growing up, you were always Daddy's girl. We did everything together. Knowing that you supported your mother in cheating on me, your own father, broke my heart more than anything she did. I didn't say that. Megan exclaimed. Never. Neil's voice pressed on. Andrew, John, you two must be the biggest idiots in the world. Do you even realize that by supporting this, you gave your wives permission to cheat on you? Andrew, I don't think Rachel would do this, but after what I've heard from Megan, you should be concerned. John, if Megan ever claims you're not satisfying her, she'll walk away. She's already told her mother how jealous she is. John looked over at Megan, who shook her head. No, baby. I never said that. I would never do that, Megan protested. Neil's voice didn't waver. And what about you, John? You can't really object to what's happening, can you? You've already said it's normal for Paula, or is it only normal because it wasn't happening to you? What will happen when it's your turn? Megan will deny she'd ever do such a thing, but ask her if she thinks it would be wrong for her. Her answer will tell you everything. John paused the video and looked at Megan. You said you were jealous of your mom. I don't remember exactly what I said. I just meant I was glad she was experiencing a new relationship and rediscovering herself. So, do you want to rediscover yourself with someone else? John asked. No, baby. Please don't blow this out of proportion. I love you and don't want to be with anyone else. Unless I can't perform anymore, right? John, can we discuss this later? We need to focus on Mom right now. Neil's voice from the video cut through their conversation. But this isn't over yet. John pressed play again, and Neil's voice filled the room. I didn't want to stay in a marriage where my wife cheated on me every week. I certainly wasn't going to stick around when I found out it was happening several times a week. Sorry, Paula, but you weren't nearly as discreet as you thought. Inviting him to Mother's Day? That was tasteless. I won't tell you where I've gone, but even if you find me, there's nothing you can do about it. Everyone in the room sat in silence, tension thick in the air, as Neil continued. I should also mention the financial situation I left you with. I took most of our money because I intend to live the rest of my life in comfort, as a reward for putting everyone else first for decades, Paula. I left you the house, which, as you know, is fully paid off and worth several $100,000. My lawyer will help you with the sale if you want. I also left $400,000 in the bank. That's $10,000 for every good year you gave me. Unfortunately, there haven't been any loans of goodwill in the last year. Don't worry about me. After taking the rest of our assets, including the investments, I'm sitting on nearly 8 figures. I'll be just fine, though I doubt any of you really care. The way I've been treated over the past year shows how you all truly feel about me. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances but remained silent as Neil's voice continued. Oh, and if you're worried I'll spend my golden years alone, don't be. I already have a companion, and she's sitting next to me on the plane right now. Let me introduce her, Deborah. A woman's face appeared on the screen, matching the voice they'd heard earlier. Hello, I'm Deborah. I'll be helping Neil spend what could have been your inheritance, she said, waving at the camera. She appeared to be in her mid-50s, an attractive brunette with a warm smile. Neil smiled back at the camera before continuing. Deborah and I have been keeping each other company for the past 4 or 5 months. Ever since I told her what my wife was doing, we've been spending a lot of time together and discovered how compatible we are. Paula, you probably remember Deborah. You've met her several times. We worked together for over 30 years since she was hired in the marketing department. She took early retirement to join me at my new home. We've been close friends all this time, and the best part. Deborah's needs are simple, just affection, hugs, kisses, and maybe a few other things. I'm looking forward to it. Everyone in the room looked at Paula, gauging her reaction to Neil's revelation. It was clear from her expression that she wasn't taking it well. John paused the video. "Mom, are you okay?" Andrew asked. "No, Andrew, I'm definitely not okay. But let's just finish this," she replied, her voice trembling. John resumed the video, and Neil's voice grew more somber as he addressed Paula directly. "Paula, I loved you from the day we met. If anyone had told me you could treat me like this, I would have knocked them out before they could finish. I looked forward to spending our final years together, with visits from our children, grandchildren, and maybe even great-grandchildren. I'm so disappointed that your physical desires ruined that for us, for me. I hope it was worth it for you. You should have enough money to live comfortably, especially if you sell the house. If you need more, I'm sure the children who supported your romance will support you financially as well. After all, it was my money that got them through college and into their good jobs, so I had a lot to do with that." The tension in the room thickened as Neil's voice continued. "It was a terrible year, and things kept getting worse. I knew about the extra time you spent with him each week. I could have ended this months ago, but I liked the idea of declaring my independence on Independence Day, so I waited. Part of me will always love you, or at least what we had. I wish things were different. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that marriage is about us, not just you and me. I never made decisions that would benefit me and hurt you, unlike what you did with Ryan. You probably thought I'd come to terms with it, maybe because I always sacrificed for you. But it doesn't matter now. It's done and can't be undone. For your sake, I hope it was worth it. Goodbye, Paula. I'll miss you and what we could have had." Neil looked directly at the camera, and the screen went black. Everyone in the room was in tears, some more than others. None of them had expected Paula and Ryan's relationship to drive Neil away. In the past, Neil had always conceded to Paula's wishes, and they assumed this time would be no different. Deep down, no one believed Neil had the guts to do anything but accept it. Tired and shaken, they all decided to stay overnight at Paula's house to support her. Rachel was cleaning the kitchen when the phone rang. She usually only got calls from Andrew or the occasional telemarketer. The number was blocked, which struck her as odd, but she decided to answer. "Hello?" Rachel said, cautiously. "Rachel, it's Neil," came the familiar voice on the other end. "Oh, God, Neil, how are you? Where are you?" Rachel asked, concern clear in her voice. "I'm fine, Rachel. Really, I am. But I can't tell you where I am right now. How are you?" Neil deflected. "I'm fine, Dad. I have news, I'm pregnant," Rachel shared. "Congratulations. How far along are you?" Neil asked, his tone softening with warmth. "Just a couple of months. We found out right after you left." "I can't believe it's been almost 3 weeks since you've been gone," Rachel replied, her voice soft. "Yes, time flies. By the way, thanks for calling me Dad." "I thought I'd lost that title," Neil said, gratitude evident in his tone. "With me, you haven't," Rachel reassured him. "You know, Dad, I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up when everyone confronted you. It was wrong. But I was new to the family and scared," Rachel admitted, her voice wavering slightly. "I had a feeling, but honestly, it wouldn't have changed anything." Paula and Megan were determined to push through with it. "You're forgiven," Neil said calmly. "Thank you, Dad. That means so much, especially because I want both grandfathers in my baby's life. Will you be part of it?" Rachel asked hopefully. "We'll see. I'm not coming back to the States, but maybe we can work something out." "I'd love to see you and the baby," Neil responded warmly. "So, how are things over there?" Rachel inquired. "In a word. Tense," Neil sighed. "Paula isn't herself most of the time, though she still sees Ryan several times a week. Megan and John are having problems, but they're keeping it under wraps. I think your comment about Megan looking for an excuse to cheat hit a nerve. How are you and Andrew? Rachel asked, switching topics. We're fine. Still in the early stages of marriage, so it's fresh. Megan and John have been together longer, so maybe that makes them more cautious, Rachel said. The granddaughters are devastated, though, Rachel added. That surprises me. You've always been close with them, Neil responded. They miss spending time with you. They don't think casual relationships are a big deal, but they understand it's different when you're married, Rachel explained. I get it. Megan's influence is clear in their reactions, Neil acknowledged. Listen, could you gather everyone at your place tonight? I think I'm ready to talk. I don't think that'll be a problem, Dad, Rachel agreed. Then we'll talk later, Neil concluded. That evening, the entire family gathered in Andrew and Rachel's living room. Rachel had made it clear that Ryan wasn't invited. Though she prepared sandwiches, the tension in the air left everyone too preoccupied to eat. At exactly 8 o'clock, the phone rang. Rachel placed it on speaker. Hi, Dad. Everyone's here, Rachel announced. Thanks, honey. Just so you all know, Deborah is with me. Let's try to have a polite conversation, not an argument. Does everyone agree? Neil asked. The family murmured their agreement. Good. I wanted to wait until some time had passed before we talked. I contacted Rachel first because I sensed she wasn't as comfortable with all of this as the rest of you. Andrew, congratulations on the baby, Neil started. Thanks, Dad. I'll try to live up to the standards of fatherhood you set, and I mean that, Andrew replied. As they say, the best thing you can do for your children is to love their mother. Keep that in mind, and you'll do great, Neil advised. Neil then addressed his granddaughters. Allison, Julia. Yes, Grandpa, they responded together. Girls, I was disappointed you sided with your grandmother, but Rachel and Deborah convinced me that you may have been pressured and didn't fully understand. You lack the life experience to comprehend the complexities of adulthood and a 40-year marriage. I still have your emails and phone numbers, so we can talk more about this later, if that's okay. Of course, Grandpa. We just miss you, Allison replied. I miss you too. Why don't you both find something to do while the adults talk? Neil suggested. The girls hugged their grandmother and said goodbye before leaving the room. So, Neil continued, does anyone have something they're dying to say? Neil, honey, please, Paula began, unsurprising to everyone. Please come back. We can work through this. If you had told me you were really leaving, we could have fixed it. Why did it have to go this far? Josephine, I told you I wouldn't accept this. But you turned to the family for support. You started inviting him to family events and seeing him multiple times a week. You replaced me with him when we were barely even roommates. I finally had enough. But you didn't say anything else. I thought you had accepted it, thought it was just something I did, Paula said, her voice shaking. Neil looked at her, his tone firm. It drove a wedge into our marriage, and there was no way out but this. From the moment you chose him over me, our marriage was doomed. I'm so sorry, Neil. Can't we, Paula began, her voice filled with desperation. No, Paula, we can't, Neil interrupted. Even if I wanted to, and I don't, I've made a commitment to Deborah, and I intend to keep it. What about your commitment to me? You made that one first, Paula pressed, tears welling up. Yes, I did. And I would still be honoring it if you hadn't broken yours. But when you did, it freed me from mine and gave me the chance to make a new one, which I have, Neil responded. The room fell into a heavy silence, the only sound being Paula's soft sobs. Paula, Neil said gently, I'm sorry, but there's no point in continuing this. Whether you meant to or not, you pushed me away. There's no turning back. Without another word, Paula stood and quietly left the room, heading toward Megan and John's bedroom. Megan, watching her mother leave, spoke up, her voice cold. Fair. Nice, Daddy. Did you call just to hurt Mom and make her cry, all because your ego couldn't handle another man making her feel better? Unfazed, Neil responded, is that really how you see it, Megan? John, how's your ego holding up? Is it ready to accept another man making your wife feel better than you? Megan glanced at John, who remained silent. Throughout their marriage, Megan had always been the dominant partner, and John, like many husbands, had gone along with it. But recently, there had been a shift, and Megan realized that their marriage was now in serious trouble. You can't support another woman's right to cheat without feeling at least a little guilt, Neil's words echoed in her mind. Her tone softened. No, Dad, that's not fair. You were right. I hadn't thought about it that way, she admitted quietly.